Guys, we finally have the full spoilers for chapter 20 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, and Sarada has finally awakened her Mangekyo again. But this time she also has Kamui. So we have a lot to discuss, but of course we're gonna start from the top. So the person on the cover for this month is gonna be Konohamaru, and the title is Because of Love. And this also plays into the Mangekyo stuff, as you guys may very well know. By the way, Boruto is also going to be on the next cover for V-Jump, so keep that in mind. Now, just to be clear, these are just the text leaks because I'm not trying to get any copyright strikes, so just bear with me. So the first one says Rayu triumphs over Mitsuki overwhelmingly, and this also plays into the official spoiler that was released 2 days ago, which shows that Mitsuki was somewhat contending with Rayu. But I also pointed out in that video that Mitsuki wasn't able to touch him. Rayu was easily dodging his attacks, and this goes back to my point that Mitsuki's biggest problem when it comes to fighting Rayu is that he isn't fast enough to actually touch him. He does have the attack potency to damage him if he does touch him, but he simply can't touch him without the help of someone else. So Mitsuki getting destroyed by Rayu doesn't surprise me. But of course, these are the spoilers, so let's see when the chapter comes out. Now it then says that Mitsuki and Araya are hostages of Rayu, and Sarada is confused about what to do. It then says that it looks like Konohamaru is on the verge of death. Matsuri looks like she's crying, but Konohamaru used the double Rasengan on her. And this, by the way, is just the Rasengan barrage that Naruto debuted versus Pain. It's one of my favorite abilities, even though it's very simple, right? It's just another Rasengan in another hand. Like, there's nothing unique about it, but it just has that cool factor. Now it also says that after Konohamaru's betrayal of Matsuri, which I assume to be the Rasengans, she got even angrier, and it seems like she's about to finish him off. This is the last thing between them in the chapter. It also says that Jura felt something strange from Matsuri, and this is also really important to consider because I mentioned this in my prior video on the topic that Jura would feel if something happened to Matsuri or Rayu, because he mentioned in chapter 5 that they're still biologically connected. They aren't connected through consciousness, but there's still a genetic connection that links them together. So Jura turning up to the battlefield is still a strong possibility, even if Boruto doesn't help them. Now, this is where we get to the most important part of the chapter. So it says here that Yodo took a strong stab from Rayu, so it looks like Yodo might not be alive for long. Now this part I do find a tad bit interesting. So it says here that Sarada was thinking about Sumire, and when she was in trouble, she activated the Mangekyo. So it seems to be somewhat implying that the emotional trigger that led to Sarada awakening the Mangekyo in this instance was Sumire, or at least the conversation she had with Sumire in the prior chapters. But again, I want you guys to take this with a grain of salt because the actual sequence of events might be a tad bit different. Now we did get some further clarification on what really happened. So it says here that when Sarada activated her Mangekyo, Sarada was the only one still standing, while Yoda was stabbed and on the verge of death, and Mitsuki and Araya were being held hostage. Sarada was then restrained by Rayu, but when she activated her 3 Tomoe, suddenly her Mangekyo ability appeared, and we actually saw it activated. It then goes on to say that the power of the Mangekyo seems like Kamui, similar to Obito as far as I can see. Sarada opened a tunnel using her Mangekyo and swept away Ryu's sand. And by the way, tunnel in this case is just referring to the portal, you know, the rift in space and that stuff. So it's not an actual underground tunnel. Now some have said that this is an actual black hole, which would be a tad bit insane because the difference between a black hole and Kamui is that it would actually kill the person instead of sending them to somewhere else. But Kamui by itself is actually one of the most broken abilities in the entire franchise. So if Sarada actually has Kamui, and when I say Kamui, I mean everything that Kamui has, because Kamui has more than one ability. It has the long range one, which appears to be the one that she's using in this chapter, and then you also have the short range one, which Obito used to suck someone into his eye. And then you have the most broken form of Kamui, which would be intangibility. And by the way guys, this one is actually autonomous. So if someone tries to attack Sarada, she doesn't need to think about becoming intangible, it just happens automatically. So it's actually somewhat similar to Damon's reflection ability, which might be a hint towards how they defeat Damon if he actually becomes a problem, right? Let's say Sarada tries to attack him with some sort of attack, right? And then he reflects it onto Sarada. Would Kamui then chip in autonomously and prevent Sarada from getting damaged? But I can see the argument from both sides, and we're kind of just going off on a tangent here, but I'll get back to the spoilers in a bit. But I can see the argument that reflection doesn't reflect attacks, it just reflects the effects of the attack itself. So let's say Sarada thinks about attacking Damon using some ability. The end result will then be reflected onto Sarada, not the attack itself. So in that instance, would Kami really protect Sarada from something like that? I'm not sure, but Let me know in the comment section. Also, it does seem like Sarada's Kamui is way better than Obito's, because Rayu goes on to say that Sarada's MS power doesn't seem to be limited to the size of the swirling barrier space like Kamui. It sucked in Ryu's Iron Sand from everyone despite being a small portal. Now, of course, we can't see this, because we don't have the panels here, but based on what Rai said, it does seem like it doesn't need to be spawned on the target. So she can just spawn it in mid-air and just, any random space, and then have it target individual things, because based on what it says here, it does seem like it targeted the sand, but ignored everyone else. And this to me, by the way, makes it seem like something else that's not Kamui, and we could be wrong here based on the assumptions being made. But as I said multiple times in this very video, take this with a grain of salt because we have no panels. It then says that the last page of the chapter shows Sarada with her Mangekyo looking stunning. Of course, this is his description, along with Mitsuki's shocked expression. So yeah, that's where the chapter ends. Now, I am a bit sad that Mitsuki didn't get the W in this one because I thought Rayu was going to be his target based on, what happened in part 1 in the anime with him fighting Shinki and all that stuff. So I thought Sarada was going to turn up against Hidari because of that connection she has to Sasuke, right? Because, her dad and stuff. And then Mitsuki was going to have Rayu and, use that sage mode that he decided not to use in part 1 against Shinki. But of course, didn't play out that way, and that's totally fine. I do hope that when the actual chapter comes out next week, Tuesday, that we get to see Mitsuki use some new abilities that we haven't seen before, and just do something a bit different, right? Go all out, get some rage moments, and then he can get defeated by Rayu. And by the way, this isn't the end of the fight. Sarada has the Mangekyo. Doesn't mean that she will win. And that might sound crazy to some, having someone awaken some pivotal power and then lose directly afterwards, which isn't something new in Boruto since that happened to Code and even Boruto mode Naruto to some extent, right? So keep that in mind for the upcoming chapter because we're not going to find out until next month. Oh, we also have another update that says, during Yoda's conversation with Sarada, she only thought about Sumire briefly, almost at the start of the chapter. So there's two contradicting information here. One was saying that she thought about Sumire before she awakened Mangekyo, and this one is saying that she thought about her only once in the chapter at the start of it, which obviously wouldn't align with the Mangekyo awakening since that was at the end of the chapter. So as I've said multiple times, take this with a big grain of salt. But yeah, with that said, we'll just end this here, and you guys can let me know in comments, what do you think is going to be Sarada's Mangekyo ability? Is it actually Kamui? Is it a black hole? Is it something else? And if it is Kamui, do you think she's gonna have all 3 abilities of Kamui? Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that there isn't any Boruto, no Kawaki, and no Kakashi. I'm not sure why anyone thought there was gonna be Kakashi, but apparently some people did. But yeah, no Kakashi, Boruto does nothing, and that's pretty much it. So yeah guys, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.